Hello my friends, and welcome to this crash course on Sas. Okay, so I've always wanted to do this course and today I finally have the opportunity to do it. So let's get into it. So what is Sas? So basically Sas stands for syntactically awesome style sheet. Okay, and it's a CSS preprocessor or a CSS extension. And basically Sas has features that are not available in regular CSS. Okay, and so you write your Sas code and your Sas code is converted or compiled into CSS. Okay, but then it makes writing CSS very easy. It makes it less stressful and time consuming. Okay, so basically we are going to see the key features that are in Sas that makes it very interesting and why you should know it. So I have a list here. So the first is variables, and then nesting, mixing, extends, partials and imports, functions and operator, conditionals and loops. Okay, so I'm not going to start explaining all of this one after the other. What we are going to do is that we're going to build something, and as we build, I would point out which of the features we are using and what they are. Okay, so let's get started. So I would get rid of this and show you what I have. So basically I have just a simple folder, okay, Sas folder, and inside of that folder I have index.html. So let's see what we have inside of index.html. I have this nav tag, and inside of the nav tag we have an unordered list that has some links, okay, list item and links, okay, and then we have a div with a class of call to action, which also has two link items inside of it. So basically that's what we have. When we didn't add any aside for the div with a class of CTA, we didn't add any class to any of our elements. Okay, so let's get started. So the first thing you need to do is you need to install Sas. Okay, so but that's very easy and pretty straightforward because we now have extensions that can help us install Sas just with the click of a button. So what I want you to do is I want you to click on this extension icon here in your Visual Studio Code, and I want you to search for Sas Live Compiler. Okay, Sas Live Compiler. So we are particularly interested in the one by, I have not actually seen what I'm looking for. Okay, it should be Live Sas Compiler. So Live Sas Compiler. Yeah. All right. So I want you to install the very first one that comes up, and it's by this guy, Ritwik Day. Okay, so go ahead and install it. Okay, I already have it installed, so I'm not going to repeat that. So I'll close this up, and basically you'll need to come to your settings file. So I'll click on this cogwheel icon here, and I'll click on settings. Okay, now within this search settings input field here, I'm going to search for Live Sas just to make it faster, and then you will see this option here that says edit in settings.json. So I want you to click on it. Okay, so now we have, this is our settings file. Now basically there are some settings that you need to have to use this plugin. Okay, if you don't have any setting, it will still work. It will just use the default setting. Okay, but I just want you to know that you can actually customize it the way you want. So from this point here, okay, you can just add it to the last, after the last settings you have. So just add a comma to your closing square brackets, and then add all of this code you see here. Okay, so Live Sas compile settings blah blah blah. So just add what you see here. The format should be expanded, extension name .css, safe path should be /css. Okay, basically what this does is that it will compile your Sas code and save it in a CSS folder that we are going to create. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close this. Okay, and I'm also going to close this. All right, so what I want you to do is I want you to come to your file explorer, and I want you to create two folders. The first one is going to be SCSS. Okay, and the next one Oh, so I'll click outside just to make sure, and then I'll create CSS. Okay, so we have two folders. Yes, now I want you to come inside of the SCSS folder and create a file, and I'm going to name this one styles.scss. okay, and you see that Visual Studio Code already gives me the Sas logo. Okay, so I'm going to select that. So I have my SCSS file created, so I can go ahead and close this. Okay, now what you're going to do next is I want you to look on the footer section of Visual Studio Code, and there should be an option here that says watch Sas. Okay, that's if you installed Sas correctly. Click on it, and basically it will start monitoring your styles.scss file. Now, one interesting thing I want to show you, I'm going to go to my file explorer, and then I'll open the CSS folder. You remember it was an empty folder, so I'm opening it up, and as you can see, we have styles.css automatically created for us when we clicked on watch Sas. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what we can do with Sas. So I will just type something here so that I can open the styles.css file. Okay, so you see here that it tells us no CSS, right? By the way, I should say that when you want to write, when we talk about Sas, right, there are two syntax. The first is the Sas syntax, and then there's the SCSS syntax. What I'm going to be using in this tutorial is the SCSS syntax, so I don't want to go too much into it, but basically there's just some subtle difference between the two. Okay, but people generally use the SCSS syntax because it's easy to use and it's similar to regular CSS. So what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to just add something. So I'm just going to add any CSS. So I'll just do a reset. So I'll say, so just a minute, let me adjust my mic. Okay, so I'll say padding, I'll set it to 0, and I'll repeat that for the margin, and then I'll say box sizing and set it to border box, and then I'll save. Okay, so now we've written something in the styles.scss file. Let's go to the CSS and see what we have there. Boom, so we have essentially the CSS we wrote here has been transpiled or converted to has been moved to our styles.css file. Well, basically it's quite similar to what we have here. So essentially what this means is that you can actually write regular CSS on your SCSS file, on your Sas file, and then it will just be moved to your CSS file. So what I'm going to do is I'll come to my index.html and I will link the CSS file. So let me just say css/, and yeah, so this is it. I've linked it. All right, so now let's get into the properties that we need. Okay, so let me just move this down, and so that I can just comment and make reference to it. So the first thing is variables. So in regular CSS we actually have variables. That's the one you put in your root directory and stuff like that. Okay, and then you add your variables. We actually have variables, but Sas makes it a lot easier to write. Okay, so let me just come here, I'll add a comment, and I'll say variables. How do we create variables in Sas? So basically you just use the $, and then you specify the name of the variable. So I'm going to call this color primary, and basically I'm just going to select a color. So there's a specific color I want to use here, and I'll just grab it and paste it in. Okay, and then I'll close. So this is a variable. This is how you create variables in Sas, and basically variables are just containers that store some information. Okay, so in this case this is storing this color, right? So that's it. So what I'm going to do is, like, we can actually store anything we want in a variable. So for example, I can store a font family in a variable. So I'll say something like Arial and sans serif. So that should be sans serif. Okay, and then I'll store this in a variable. So basically we can store whatever we want in a variable. So things like width, any CSS property can be stored in a variable. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy like the two more variables and I'll paste them in. Okay, so gray and white. All right, and then I'll save. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is I am going to try to style the property here, or this markup here. Okay, so that's what we're going to do next. And let's just, okay, so we're going to target the nav element. So let's begin. So nav, and basically for the nav, I am going to try to center this guy here. So I will start by, first I'll give it a background color. So let's give it a background color, and we're going to use our variable. So I'll just say gray, and I'll save. Okay, and as you can see, it reflects here. So our styles dot css file is correctly linked up. So let's see what we have. Okay, so you see here that we already have the nav and the background color. Okay, so let's continue. So let's give it a height, and I'm just going to say 10 vh, and I'm going to center it. So I'll use my flex to center it. So display flex and justify content to center, and then align items also to center. Okay, so you see this guy is centered in the middle of the page. Okay, now what I want to do next is I'm going to target the unordered list inside of the nav tag. So the regular thing I would have done, right, if I was not writing Sass, I would have said something like nav and ul, right, and then I'll then begin to add my styles inside of this. But let me now introduce you to a property in Sass called nesting, a feature in Sass called nesting. And essentially nesting is a way that we can, stack up different CSS properties inside of one another so that we can write less code. Okay, so instead of coming outside here, right, I'm just going to comment this out, and I'm going to come inside of this nav, and I'll just say ul, and I'll continue writing my code. Okay, so instead of coming out, I'm inside here, and I'll get the same results. Now let's go ahead and add some properties to our unordered lists. Okay, so for the unordered list here, I'm also going to like to use this flex to center it. So I'll come here and paste that in. So let me just indent this properly. Okay, so I'll save, and as you can see, this is looking the display flex property has taken effect here. Okay, so for the unordered list, let's remove the list style. So I'll say list style, and I'll set it to none, and then I'll add some margin on the right. So margin hyphen right, and let's just do 50px. So 50px. Okay, and then to create some space between these buttons, these link items I'm going to use as buttons, and then the main link. Okay, and then let's do, okay, so before then, let me introduce you to another feature here. So I'm going to introduce you to mixins. Okay, now, but what mixins basically are, just a block of code that we can reuse. Okay, more like if you maybe write JavaScript, more like functions. So we can write a function and then use it multiple times. So that's what a mixin actually is too in Sass. Okay, so and how do we write mixin? We write mixins with the mixin keyword. So you see here that we've already used the justify content, align items, display flex 2 times. So instead of writing this much code, we can actually put it into a mixin. Okay, so I'm just going to come under my variable, and I'm going to add a comment and say mixin. And then the way you create mixin is you use the @mixin keyword. So I'll say @mixin, and then you specify the name of the mixin. So in this case, I'm centering an element using flexbox. So I'll say flex hyphen center, and then I'll then place the code that I want this mixin to have. So basically what I'll just do is I'll just come here and cut this guy out, and then I'll paste it in here, right? Then what am I going to do next? I'm going to reference this mixin inside of this nav property here. So basically I would like to make it the first thing here, and the way you reference it is you include it. Okay, so I'm going to say @include and my code editor is already completing that for me. And then I'll say the name of the mixin. So in this case, it's Flex Center, right? And I can just close that here. Okay. And if I save, you'll see that nothing changes. Okay. So I'm going to do that for this UL too. So why don't we just get rid of the display flex blah blah blah. If I save that, you see that it's like this. But if I come here and include the mixin and save, you see that it changes. Okay, so you see that somehow we've written less code in Sass. Okay, so let's go to our styles.css file and see what we have. So you see we have a reset, a nav, and we have a nav and unordered list. So it's as if we're writing regular CSS. Okay, but we're not interested in this file. What we're interested in is our styles.css SCSS file, because when we want to maintain our code, this is what we're going to change. Okay, so that's it. All right, so let's go ahead and complete this code here. So I think I have 2 spaces here. Let me reduce that, and I can get rid of this as well. So let's continue. So inside of our unordered list, right, we have list items. So I'll just come inside here and say li. Okay, and then I'll add some properties here. So basically what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to add some margin. So I would say margin, and I'll just do 5px just to space out the menu items a little. Okay, so you see that we are nesting. You can nest as much as you want actually. So let me go one more. So I'll just do a, and let me just scroll down so you can see what we are doing. And you see that our Sass file is being monitored, so that's why it says watching here. Okay, so for the a tag, basically let's just set the text decoration to none. So text decoration, and set it to none. That's going to get rid of the underline, and maybe I can add some font size to, maybe I'll just do 16px. Okay, or let me just increase that a little. Okay, so it's a little bit bigger. And maybe I'll do some color, and well, I didn't actually prepare any color, so I'll just say black or something like that. Okay, all right, that doesn't look very nice, so maybe I'll just get rid of it. Okay, so now there's one more thing I want to show you. Now supposing we wanted to add a hover class to this link here, right? I'm sure you already know how to add the pseudo class, but the way we do that is we're going to add an ampersand, and then we're going to add the hover pseudo class. Okay, now what this means is that we are gathering all of the CSS selectors up till this point. Okay, so let me just add a color. Okay, so I'll just say color, and I'll just use my color primary. So I think it's, and then I'll say color primary, and then I'll save. Okay, now let's come. Of course it works. If you come here, you see that when you hover, it works. Maybe I'll just make the color dark. So originally I'll make the color, let's just say dark, and maybe something will come up. I guess black is it, so black, or 333. So I shouldn't actually be wasting so much time in choosing a color, but I don't know why. All right, so this is fine. All right, so if you hover, you see that it actually works, right? But let's see our styles.css file so we can understand and see the flow of things. So if I come here, right, you see that for our hover pseudo class, it takes up all of the properties up till this point. Okay, so that's basically what this ampersand sign does right here. Okay, all right, so that's it for this menu. Now we're going to, so we've seen variable, we've seen nexting, we've seen mixins. Okay, now we're going to look at extends. Okay, and to do that, we're going to have to style these buttons you see, or these link items you see here, in the class of call to action. So you see there's a class of call to action, and inside we have 2 links. So let me come to my style.scss file, and I'm just going to come down here and I'll say .cta. Okay, Now for my CTA, I really don't want to place anything inside of it, so I'm just going to go ahead and just say btn, right? Sorry, that will be .btn, because inside of the CTA, a tag have classes of btn and btn1 and 2 respectively. Okay, so I'll just come here and say .btn, and basically for the button, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add some properties. So I'll just start by saying, let's just do font size, and let's just say 16px. Let's set the text decoration to none, and that will get rid of the underline. Let's add some margin. Okay, maybe not margin first. Let's do a let's add some padding. Okay, and let's do 10 pixels, or maybe 8 pixels, 8px. Let's set the border to none, and let's save. Okay, so we don't really you're not going to really appreciate the what we've done until I add a background color. Okay, so let me just do a background color of color primary and save. Okay, and then let's set the color to white. So I think we have a white variable. Okay, maybe I'll give the font weight, and I'll make it bold, and save. Okay, and then let's do some border radius, and let's just do 3px and save, and that's about it. Okay, so don't pay attention to my font. Okay, just the most important thing is getting the concept. Okay, all right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make this 10 to make it bigger. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is whenever we create a button, right, these are like the styles we are going to use repeatedly. Okay, maybe I'll just add some space, so I'll just say margin -right, and I'll just do maybe 10px. Okay, so that there's some space on the buttons, between the buttons rather. All right, so now these are properties that we are probably going to use when we, for the 2 buttons. Okay, we're already actually using it for the 2 buttons, but you see we can put all of this property in an extend. Okay, just in case we are creating another button, we can reference these properties here. Okay, so maybe in the course of creating the project, in the body of our websites, we're maybe adding another button, we can simply just reference this. Okay, so let me show you how you can do that. So basically I'll come up here and I'll add a comment, and I'll say extend, right? And the way you create an extend is we can create a placeholder. So I'll just use this %, and I'll say btn, and then I would come here and grab all of these properties here, right? So I'll just do Control X, and then I'll paste that in. Okay, so I probably need to indent this. But then I'm sure you already know, so let me not spend too much time indenting this. I think it's something I can do fast, so let me just, okay, so that's done. Now I would save, and as you can see, the properties are gone. Okay, so now remember that our button has modifier classes of button1 and button2. So let's come here. I would say .btn1, and I'll come down and say .btn2, and basically what I'll just do is I'll just extend this button placeholder. So the way you do that is I'll come in here and I'll say @extend, and then you specify the name of the property you want to extend. So in this case it's at %, that's percentage, and btn, and then I'll close. That's all. And if I save, you'll see that the first button has the property, right? And then I'm just going to do the same for the next button. So I'll Control C, and then I'll paste in, and then I'll save. Okay, so basically, how do I want these buttons to be different? I want the second button to have a different background color, or maybe the first one. So I'll just come here and say background color and set it to, let's just say green, and save. right? So you see that they have I've changed the background color. So basically I've created this property here and I can use it anywhere on my page. Okay, now you may want to ask that what is the difference between an extend and a mixin, because they look very similar. Okay, so I'm going to go to my styles.css file and I'll show you the difference. So let's come here. So we use the mixin for the display flex center, so that's display flex, justify content, align items, and you see that it's here and it's here, so that's in 2 places. All right, so let's go and see the extend we used for the btn. So let's come here. All right, so this is the extend, right? It's appearing just once, but look at the way it's displayed here. So the call to action button, the btn, and then there's a comma, right? And then the call to action button and the btn2. So btn1 and 2 are just on one. So all of these rules are applied once, in other words. And then we have the modifier class here. So basically that's the difference between an extend and a placeholder. Okay, so we've seen variables, nesting, mixing, extend. Let's look at, okay, let me talk about functions a little bit before I talk about partials and imports. Okay, so functions, let me go back to my styles.css file, scss file. Essentially a function is a block of code that does something, but then it's more than just a block of code that does something. A function has the ability to take in parameters and arguments. Okay, if you don't have any experience with like another programming language like maybe JavaScript, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use this mixin as an example to explain what a function is. Okay, so inside of this mixin, flex center mixin, we have these properties. Basically what differentiates a mixin from a function is its ability to take in parameters, and those parameters will be referenced as arguments subsequently. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add parentheses here, and basically I'm going to say, okay, first off let me just add a property here. So I would say flex direction, right? So right here I'm going to say $direction, and then I'm going to come here and reference it. I'll say dollar and direction. Now what this means is that wherever I include this mixin, right, I have to specify this property for this this value for this flex direction property. So if I don't do that, let's see, so let me save that. Okay, so nothing happens because but let me come to this nav, right, and the includes, or maybe I'll use this unordered list. I think the unordered list is better. So I'll come here, I would add a bracket, and then I would specify a flex direction property. So if you remember your flex direction in CSS, you know that you can have rows and column. Okay, so you can also have things like row reverse, column reverse, but that's not the point. The point is the default is row. So let's change this to column. I think that's the spelling, and I'll save. Okay, so let me save that, and let me go to my styles.css and let's see why it's not. Oh, I think I know why. Let me just check it first. So nav ul, so my styles have not taken. Okay, I hope this is not one of those issues we have with the plugin. So it says it's watching, so let me just look closely. This should definitely work. DIRECTION, column, and save. So let me open with live server one more time. Okay, let me come here and add row and save. Okay, so I think I know what happened. So the problem we had was that we did not add the property here. Okay, so it was causing an error. It was preventing the file from compiling. Okay, so we added row here, and you can see here that the unordered list where we added column has changed. Okay, so if I come to the styles.css file, right, and okay, so you see here that we have nav unordered list, and then the flex direction is set to column, whereas in the nav the flex direction is set to row, which is like the default. Okay, so that's basically how functions operate in CSS. So we can have multiple properties here. So I think I'll just change this back to row. So let me just say row, and I'll save, and as you can see, it's gone back to normal. So basically that's how functions work similarly, okay, to what we just did here. So now let's talk about partials and imports. Oh, it's already 30 minutes. I wanted this video to be less than 30 minutes, but it's fine. Okay, the most important thing is that we learn. So partials and imports, basically this is a Sas feature that helps us to break our code into different files, okay, and we can simply reference them. So it enables us to separate our code into different files and then import them into a single file. So let me show you how that works. So I'll come here, and inside of my SCSS file, I'm going to, so let me click on the SCSS file, and maybe I'll just create a file since it's basically tutorial purposes. But if you were working in the real world, you probably want to create a folder and then put all your files into that folder. Okay, so I would just say variables. So to create a partial, I would say underscore and then name that file. So variables.scss. Basically the underscore will just tell our compiler to ignore this file. Okay, now what do we want to put inside of variables.scss? We want to come to our, so let me close this up. I think I'm done. I'll come to my Sass file, and I'll grab my variables. Okay, so let me cut it out. So I'm actually getting rid of it. I'll save, and I'll come to variables.scss and I'll paste that in. Okay, so essentially this is where I'm going to save all of my variables in any project I work on. Okay, I'll save this file, but I need to reference this file inside of my Sass file. Okay, so that is known as importing. Okay, so creating the file is known as the partials aspect, and then we need to import that file to our styles.scss file. And basically the way we do that is we say @import. So just a minute. So we come up here, like it should be the first thing you do on your Sass file, on your SCSS file. So we say add, and then we say import. Okay, and then we'll just add this double quotes, and then inside of the quotes we then reference the file. So in this case the name of the file is variable. Is there S? Let me just confirm if there is S. So there is S, so variables. Okay, so we don't need to say .scss. All we need to say is variables, and that's all. Okay, and then we save. Okay, so you see that nothing happens, so everything is working fine here. Now if I come to my variables file, so let me just tweak something. So I'll just change my primary color, which is what is referenced in this button here. I'll change my primary color to something. So let me just, come on, my color, okay, so let me just change it to violet. Okay, and then I'll save and see what happens here. So it changes here even though this is just a standalone variable file. Okay, so that's happening because we've already referenced that file here. So basically how you actually write Sass project is that you're going to break all of your files into small partials, right? So for example, let me see, so something like our mixing, for example, I'll create a mixing file and I'll place all of my mixing inside that file. All my extends, so where's my extends? So this extends I have here, I'll create an extends file, partial file, I'll add all of my extents, my animation, even the button, right? The button is like a component, so I'll take that button, I'll put it inside a file for that particular CSS. So basically that's how we can pieces our file into small parts. And the good thing about that is that when you want to maintain your code, you know exactly what you want to do. So for example, if I want to work on the typography, I can just go to my typography file and make changes and do stuff. So it makes it very easy for us to maintain our code. Okay, so what do we have? So we have conditionals, and so we have operators, conditionals, and loop. I'm not going to cover conditionals and loop in this tutorial because we use that when we want to do stuff, quite complex stuff. And basically it's used when we write CSS frameworks. Okay, so for your regular everyday CSS, you write projects, you build projects. These are the things you need that I've talked about. Okay, so thank you so much for watching this video. If you're not subscribed to my channel, I want to encourage you to subscribe and hit the like button on this video. See you in another one.